Thank you, Reverend Angel, for being here with us today. And we're very excited about you coming to the Spiritual Directors International Conference in St. Louis on April 26th to 29th. And we had a couple of questions for you today. The first is, I wonder if you could speak a little bit about the connection between contemplation and action.
The contemplative role and the contemplative way of life is a form of action, depending on how we direct it. If I step back into the time of the Buddha, what I would say is he was speaking about the potential for the personal access to liberation versus having to have an intermediary. And so there was never a question of whether one's liberation, salvation, action, whether one's action and their contemplation was on behalf of all. That was always written into the basic tenets of understanding why we would want a personal liberation at all. Why would we want to have contemplation as our pursuit at all is on behalf of the collective, and thus when it is imbued with that understanding of that everything that we're doing is on behalf of the collective, then our contemplation is our action. And there's no difference between the two.
Just taking the lens of healing for a second, right? We say, in the Buddhist tradition, there's this split between more orthodox Buddhism, the Theravadan tradition that says, heal yourself, take the time to figure out where you stand in relation to the universe, become one with it. And that's one approach. Or the Mahayana tradition, which is more, you can't heal yourself unless you acknowledge that you're part of this collective and you act in its greatest, for its greatest benefit. I raised this question because I want us to move beyond the theoretical to something that people can actually get their hands around, which is how, as a spiritual director, do I respond to injustice in the world?
Ultimately, the idea is that when one heals oneself, then one is enabled to see and respond to, as they would say in the Mahayana tradition, to respond to the cries of the world. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a conversation really about emphasis and whether you tell what's on the other end of the journey, or you just say, let's get you focused on this aspect. Because I don't think that in our deepest contemplation, we can be in relationship with the world without actually responding to the injustice in the world. I think that is inherent in contemplation, in deep contemplation. If we're only contemplating ourselves, well, then of course we can continue just contemplating ourselves. We can remain inside of a narrow bubble. We can remain caught inside of our own privilege. We can remain caught inside our particular identity with our particular tribe. We can stay there. But all of the traditions call us forth into a relationship and understanding of compassion. And in order to have compassion, we need to have compassion that is in relationship to the so-called other. And as we extend the so-called other away from our own immediate mirrored reflection of who looks like me, who sounds like me, who is mirroring back to me, which would be a very self-centered, egocentric location, right? Mm-hmm. Who affirms me is who I speak to would defy the intention of all of the great spiritual traditions, which is to extend our compassion to others, to see people as they are and for who they are. And I would say that all of our traditions invoke the responsibility that we have in order to respond to those that have less than us. All of our traditions have ways in which they call us forth to say, from a moral standpoint to respond to those that have less than us. And those that have less than us is not always those that have less financial resources. It's those of us that have less access, those of us that have less entitlement, those of us that have less sense of opportunity in the society, those of us that have less standing. One could say that falls into the case of, queer, lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual people, the people that have less access at one point, and still that's women that have less rights and access to and entitlements to be able to choose the path of work that they want to do, of the ways in which they want to express their talents and their gifts in the world, the ways in which Black people, for instance, or Latinos in some parts of the country or wherever we may be, have less access and entitlement to thrive. All of our traditions are asking us to hold the ground in terms of being in our contemplative practice, to hold the ground of being willing to have a sense of seeing the other and responding out of our ethical ground of knowing our own suffering, knowing that where we stand, that we want to be able to respond to those that have less than. Yeah. So I would say that what we're really saying in a very specific way, going back to what you're saying, is like what's very concrete is like, how do we respond as contemplatives? We go as deeply as we can into our own suffering and the heart of our own knowing, and the willingness to see the world as it is, as it presents itself, and not cordon off the parts that are uncomfortable for us. And the only thing that is left for us to do in that is to respond.
Many of our spiritual directors come from various traditions, but traditions that can be kind of exclusive. You say, well, it's my way or the highway, right? There is only one way to God, and it's through Jesus. And I'm drawn to this interspiritual dialogue. I like it. It appeals to me, and yet it frightens me, and it threatens my identity, and it threatens my Jesus. What do I do with my Jesus? So how would you, what kind of tools can you point to that actually would help someone who comes from this particular mindset say, okay, I can grow by being in engagement with people who don't look like me, don't believe what I do, don't act like I do, and whom I may not agree with, but that's okay. What kind of tools can they cultivate to increase their ability to commune with people outside of their tribal orientation, if you will?
Yeah. I think that what I would encourage is to internalize your Jesus, to internalize your truth. When we are deeply connected to our own truth, there's no room for us to deny or inhibit or aggress against the truth of others. It's our own uncertainty that causes and calls forth an aggression or a reluctance to allow someone else's truth to stand as it is. When we're certain of our own path, of our own way, of our truth, of what is real for us, what we know to be the path to heaven, what we know to be the path to God, what we know the path to be to Shita heaven, to nirvana, to all of the things, to be one with God, to be with the divine, to find union, to enter into nirvana, to walk the Buddha's way, to walk the footsteps of Jesus. If we know that that is our way, we can stand firmly in our way. So I would encourage people to say, where is it that you are externalizing your truth, your knowing, such that fear is able to enter into your heart by the presentation of something that is other than the thing that you know. When we are clear about our own truth, when we are deeply rooted and committed to our own truth, there's no room for anything else but the possibility of everyone else's truth to be just what they are. And in fact, when we're firmly rooted, we see our truth in everyone else's truth. When we are firmly rooted in our own truth, the only thing we can see is that truth expressing itself in the myriad ways. So we see our Jesus express itself in Muhammad. We see our Jesus express itself in the historic Buddha. We see our Buddha express themselves in the many different facets and the ways in which Jesus took on different personalities throughout the course of his life. And we go, oh, there's my deities. There's my Avalokiteshvara. There is my Kuan Yin. There is my Manjushri. There is my truth in that truth. And all we want is for that truth to express itself, most especially when that truth is fortified, seated in the presence of its love. So when we are in the presence of our love and our truth, all we see is that love and that truth express itself. Hence the way we talk about seeing the Buddha within someone else, seeing God in someone else, seeing Allah in someone else. We see them in them. We see their material manifestation in someone else, because we don't have another truth. So we don't have to partition our truths. We don't even have to, quote unquote, get inside someone else's truth. All we have to do is be so firmly rooted, so comfortable in our own truth, not having it externalized and needing to be validated by someone going along with our way, but rather that we're so firmly rooted in our own truth that we see nothing but our truth in all of its beautiful myriad manifestations.
Thank you. It's really beautifully said. Can you explain what it is that you mean when you use the term Dharma?
Yeah. So, I'll back into it this way, and I'll say, we have occasion in the English language to borrow words from other languages, because our language doesn't express the kind of nuance of that particular thing. So there's some way in which one could say one has a reason to live, but when you say raison d'être, you're saying something else that's in addition to just the words reason to live, right? So dharma is as a Sanskrit word, has this myriad facets at its core. It could mean law, universal law, truth, the thing that applies to all of us, but it also means, in another facet of its expression, it also means one's own path, one's calling, one's way. That's one's truth, but it's a different kind of truth. And so I would say that Dharma, I use it as a way of saying, here is a word to, and we're in a lot of conversation about what truth means these days. Yeah. Here is a word that gives us something of the multiple facets of our notion of what it is to have a truth, a way, a knowing, an understanding that is simultaneously entirely unique, but also universal. And so Dharma is a way for me of saying, we have, all of us, every single one of us, a truth, a knowing, a way of having the wisdom present in us that we can express and that we're entitled to express, that we are one facet of the one single truth. Mm-hmm. And our truth is one facet of one single whole truth that binds us all together. And so when I talk about radical Dharma, I'm talking about us, each of us, really finding out what is our whole truth, our radix, our complete truth. In other words, the truth that is not limited to just the way that I identify in any particular moment in time, but rather the truth of who I am that comes from the truth of who I am not. The truth of who I am becomes complete by my knowing of your truth and understanding and allowing myself to hold simultaneously your truth too. It makes my truth more true, my more complete, more whole. Mm-hmm. Because what I understand is that how I understand myself is in fact a direct in direct correlation to what I think I understand about who you are and who you are not. And so Dharma allows for the multiplicity of those things, my one single universe, clear, unique way and path, my unfolding, and my cognizance, my deeply held understanding in my belly, in my guts, in my bones, that I am of one truth, that I am of one single whole entire truth that is arising and co-arising and falling away all at one time, and that I exist in the wholeness of that, not separate from it, with all of it, unique inside of it, and yet still just one single Dharma, one single truth.